12. All trustees are present. Was this eating properly notes?
Yes.
Okay. Our first item for the agenda is a special order of business. No, is consideration of the direction of operational items required for 2019 for our prioritization process. And I believe in your packet we got a bunch of memos on this, so we're trying to be as clear as possible in order to make the process tonight go smoothly. The facilitator, Lindsay, has done a fabulous job to date and got us where we're at, and we want to thank her publicly for assisting us in prioritization for 2019. She's not here tonight, so Rebecca and I are going to work together to outline just the process that we use. It can be changed by the board if needed, but this was our best shot at getting it done within the next hour and 30 minutes. So just quickly, just to go over objectives. When we sat down, got to sit down with Lindsay and Rebecca, and it was, we're at our final last stage of prioritization. What are the things that the management still needs from the village board in order for us to effectively operate our village going forward for the next year? What is it that they need from the policymakers, which is the village board? And basically there were two things outlined. One is just general direction on some of the strategic efforts that are important and timely to advance our financial, our environmental, our social, and organizational position. But more importantly, there's some larger policy initiatives that encompass a lot, and they take up a lot more time, they consume a lot more time for operationally to work on, and so those kind of were separated out, and then to just get a direction on which one of those, or two of those, or three, but one or two would probably make the most sense, that the board collectively feels are important to move forward first. The process that will follow for this meeting is we want it to be very clear so that there weren't any kind of confusion. We've separated it into three different things. The first is when Lindsay left us, she had developed a list based on the prioritization of our large, medium, and small, not on the last meeting, but all the way back to the second to last meeting, so the June meeting, because we really had a productive conversation. So we wanted to make sure that that list still remained. She then went, and depending on how many people voiced that they were for it and supported it, she put in the categories of green, yellow, red. And that's the first list you have in front of you. Basically, what we're going to do tonight is to start there and just to make sure that they're categorized correctly as the board majority feels they should be. It does not mean that red or any of them are less important. It simply means what does the village board feel is the most important to move forward first. And the most important in order to advance our environmental, our organizational, our social village priorities. And so if it is marked in red or yellow, it still can be considered, especially when we're delegating to committee work. Because if some committee doesn't have anything and in green, the next step would be to look at the yellows. So please don't think that anything on this list doesn't mean it's happening. It just simply is what is the priority for the village for the upcoming 1 to 2 years. So that's the red, yellow, green. Does anyone have questions on that? Trustee Walkers.
I just had a question on whether you said delegating to committee work.
Yes.
What do you mean, to which kind of committee? Since we temporarily don't have board committee.
Correct. So in the past, so for resident committees, because we have committee of the whole, and Rebecca and I will, usually Rebecca will agendicize things and I just review it for the board to make sure if trustees had anything they want to see on the agenda that it would get on there. But for the resident committees, at some point we needed to define how they were going to get assigned work. And so in the past, whenever we put things on future agenda items, President Johnson and Chris, the village manager, so the president and the village manager sat down and delegated work down to committees. They also can create their own work. I mean, at some point, we had talked about that, and I'll let Rebecca handle this one. It's more of a staffing issue of.
Because I kind of take, I don't completely agree with how you're describing what the committee, how the committee structure has worked in the past.
Okay.
What we have asked sometimes, for example, when we were talking about changing different ordinances or whatnot, is if someone, for example, Tyler, would bring it to the citizen committees, and I'm gonna use the word citizen because that's citizenry, that's what we're talking about. Or residents, whatever, however you wanna say it. But, and that, you know, it was kind of incumbent upon them to decide whether or not they wanted to take up a certain project. And so that's why I was, when you said delegating to the committee work, that's a complete shift from how things have kind of gone in the past. For example, when we reinstated the Conservation Committee, we had our own projects that we found on the committee is very important. And if we had to wait for, you know, a delegation from the board, that would have been a lot different as far as like, you know, what would drive what. So I guess thank you for.
Sure.
I just say there's no change, right? We're not gonna all of a sudden delegate to the resident citizen committees and tell them what they have to work on, right?
Let me respond, and then if Rebecca, if you can respond based on what we had, whatever you're feeling. From what I've heard from management and from our discussion, the resident committees, they submitted a lot of initiatives, and all of them, in my opinion, and I'm sure most of our opinion, were very good, and those were really their priorities for the year. We've gone through a process so far, and we will be marking them as red. So not just saying these two are going forward, but just saying here's what we think as a village board for the policymakers, setting the agenda of how much workload we can manage. Like, here's a schedule of priorities so that when we pass it to the administration, they have some footprint or some blueprint to decide how much work they can handle from committee of the whole, from village board, from resident or citizen committees. So I know there's been some pushback on that now, and I'll let Rebecca handle that. That's coming from, I agree with Rebecca, but that is coming from the administration that she wants. I agree that there has to be, we're undergoing this process for a reason, and one of the reasons stated at the beginning was that there were a lot of requests coming in for work and from the different committees, and that it was getting to be unmanageable.
And I understand that, and I do think it's kind of incumbent upon us as a board to allow the resident citizen committees to come up with their own agenda because they have different perspectives, and I understand completely the staffing issue. But, you know, it's also, we can say, this is just not possible. I'm not saying I think we might be overstepping what our role is here if we're gonna start dictating what resident citizen committees do.
Well, they submitted the initiatives.
I understand, and I understand how we can discuss it, but we can also give our feedback on what we think that we would advocate for, but I don't think necessarily that we say, okay, we as a board have decided, you guys have done all this hard work, you probably have a lot more institutional, other kind of knowledge regarding these kind of committees, conservation, for example, bike and pet, et cetera, that, you know, I don't know. I wouldn't want to take away the process and the public input and the transparency, and of course, you know, the impact that members of our community can have by being allowed to. You know, this is one way that they get to voice what's important to them. And for us as trustees, this is very beneficial to hear what these committees are doing instead of us dictating. And I'm not saying you're exactly saying this, but that's kind of what I'm hearing, is that we're going to dictate to them the work that we want them to do. And they're volunteers, and they're not elected, and they're not paid. So
thank you, because I agree with you. I don't want it to come off that way, so let me just see if I can rephrase it to satisfy that concern, because I had it too. Two things is we are strictly working off of the initiatives they submitted as priorities. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're not going to throw them all out and say you're going to work on this. So really, the process was
that would be awful,
right? Yeah, no, I would never advocate for that. I don't think any of us would. And also, the memo states that Rebecca and I will meet with the chair of each committee prior to setting an agenda after the prioritization process and go over their own initiatives and whether they were red, yellow, green, and then work with that committee chair to develop. It's not going to be just from the board and the administration, but literally to say, well, these are the first kind of things that the board felt were a priority that you submitted.
Right, and if that's what you guys are doing, I'm not sure, like, you're going as the president, but also an individual trustee. So if you two are telling your committees, like, I'm not sure that really plays part of the transparent process.
Okay.
So us as a board.
But two things. One, it's going to be based on what the village board adopts. And two, before we would actually put anything on the agenda, that work plan comes back before the village board. This is just a way to get the work done, as we have in the past, and we're trying to be very clear and precise on how we can move forward. So the village, I'm not going to be assigning any work that the village board has not prioritized in this process.
I guess I'm saying I don't think it's our role to prioritize what a group or a citizen committee wants to deem as important to them. We can tell them we don't have the financial resources, we can tell them we don't have the staff resources, but I don't think it's our job to tell those people who are out in the field, let's just say, you know, doing the hard work, what they can and cannot work on. And that's, I guess that's my difference that I'm seeing.
Oh, okay, and then I would like Rebecca just to give her response.
Well, I mean, I think in the past, like the Parks Commission has come, you know, worked on stuff and come without really talking to the board, and then come forward and wanted and asked for things in the budget, and we haven't approved it. And so, I mean, I do think it's valuable. Yeah, I agree absolutely. I mean, if Human Resources, Human Relations Commission, or Parks, or any of them, like safety, they want to work on things that is important to them, which hopefully they submitted. I mean, we're just kind of telling them, you know, this is how, to give them a feel for how we are valuing the various initiatives that they gave. Because that was regrettable, you know, 2 years in a row that we did not vote any funding for the things that Parks have been working on. So.
No, I appreciate them asking for a budget, sorry.
Oh.
I'm just, if we have all these initiatives, we really never ranked all these priorities. I mean, we went through them, but we didn't.
We have an hour and a half, so I do want to ask for Rebecca's opinion, and then I will call on the rest of the trustees with questions, if that's okay.
I thought you'd take comments on the memo. One thing on the last paragraph here indicated that anything on this yellow, green, red is a go if the time allows for the president proceeds to put it on the agenda. Some of these only have one person. That's not a priority of the board, and I'm not sure it's the board's will to move all these forward. I mean,
Okay.
just because they're on the list.
You asked the question, so I'll answer it for you, and then I want to turn it over to Rebecca.
Okay.
But I'm glad to call upon you after she has her say. The only reason that I had written in there that I don't want any committee member or board member to feel like something dropped off, like they submitted something they wanted to work on and it dropped off. But we have to realize we've done this entire process to come to a point of we need a manageable work plan. And so if we don't want that any longer, we just want to go back to what we had, we can start over, or we don't really need to go through this again. The point being is that those things on the list, at some point, the end product was supposed to be a prioritization of what the board felt was important to move forward, and then it was going to be passed on to the administration to determine with the staffing levels where they could bring it forward, like what they could actually work on in a year. And so, and then because that plan, that work plan will come back to the village board, so we will see a comprehensive plan. We get another policy, directive time. We get to see it, we get to talk about it again. But short of that, I know things dropped off, and that's what I haven't gotten that far in my explanation. The second memo addresses some things that had dropped off that you don't see as what our priorities were, but still need direction from the village, for the village manager and operations. So saying that yellow would proceed or red would proceed is simply that if a committee doesn't have anything in green and they submitted their work, we would like to give them something they want to be working on. And so we would move down to yellow. So, but again, there has to be some process that we go through to prioritize the work program. So I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca because I know Trustee Mario has more questions.
I'll keep it brief, but just from an operational perspective, the committee's outstanding. They have done an incredible amount. I mean, they're just incredible resources when it comes to a lot of the specialized areas, and that's very valuable. One of the struggles we have is that there's not clear expectations for the amount of staff resources provided to them, and many times monthly meetings, we don't have, to be very clear, we don't have the staff that helps to continue the management of the meetings as they go on. One of the ways that we've tried to work with that has been meeting with Human Relations, how we've ask them to meet 4 times a year, so not every month, so that we kind of focus that time and energy, but it still allows them the opportunity to meet outside of that time. My goal is not to squelch that creativity and the items that they come forward in the community, but I do feel that it's important that we as a board have good communication with the committees. So if something is out there that they are working on that may not have time available from a staff resource perspective, or that the board may be interested in funding in the future, I think that it's a communication that's valuable to take place. One of the biggest things that I've heard from each committee as through the visioning process has been they've never had an opportunity to kind of see what other groups are working on or what your priorities are. And many times there are common lines of synergy between all the different groups. So I think it's going to help, it's just going to help that collaboration and get people moving in a greater momentum for a better impact or a larger impact on some items. But that's, if you have any questions, I can answer them.
And I just wanted, one thought, thank you so much, was as we started the process with, we would like as a board to take on some of these larger initiatives that we'll get to at the end of the process tonight. And in order to be able to do that and do it successfully, it's going to take time from our administration. And so what I've heard from management all along has been to get these